My name is Ricky Volz. I'm a co-founder of Kinetech and the current COO. I live in Houston, Texas. We call San Antonio our home base because we all grew up together in San Antonio. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things I think that make the Mendix platform so powerful, but the one that I come back to the most is probably just, the most obvious thing is the speed with which you can build solutions, right? The amount of time and effort it takes to go from an idea to something real that can be seen and used is really, really fast. And that makes up for a lot of things along the way, right? For one, you can afford to be wrong. You can afford to fail because it doesn't cost you a bunch of time or money to fix those mistakes. One of the buzzwords these days is agile development or agile delivery and agile processes. Everybody wants to be agile, but it's hard to do that if you don't have the right tool set, right? You need a short feedback loop. You need to be able to actually build iteratively and do that quickly. And the platform enables that. Of course, we can go into the why that is with visual modeling and all of that, but ultimately it comes down to the fact that you can build things really, really quick. And you can take ideas to market really, really fast. And that market might just be your internal user group, right? But being able to take something that they talk about in a Monday status meeting, for example, and then show them that on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, is extremely powerful, right? Yes, it gets you to the point where you've got that solution ready to go, and then you can realize the benefits of it, but it also makes it a more engaging environment for the business, right? The idea that, we come in, or if you're doing this internally at your organization, you come in and say, hey, we're gonna build you X, Y, and Z, but we'll come back in 6 months or a year or 18 months. For one, what you deliver is not going to hit the mark. It's impossible that it would, but you've also kind of turned off the business in a way, right? It's not as engaging to them. They're separated from it more. Versus if you're truly engaged on a daily or weekly basis, they buy into the process just as much as you do, or just as much as we would, right? And they have a vested interest in it just like we do. And that engagement is really important because, we're not just trying to build software faster, we're trying to build better software. We're trying to build software that actually solves real problems. For these enterprise software, that's the goal, right? All software should have some actual business purpose. It's not just something we're doing for fun, right? There's some real fundamental purpose to it. And the engagement that comes from the business when they're part of that process and they see that quick feedback loop and they see the quick turnaround time is a big part of what makes it really powerful to me. The other thing that really jumps out is it simplifies application development, right? I mean, it makes it a lot easier to build sophisticated systems. I'm not a developer by kind of nature. A lot of people in the Mendix world learned a lot on my own, kind of self-taught, leaned on some of our partners to learn over the years. I wasn't a computer science guy in college or any of that, but yet I'm an expert engineer. I'm able to build complicated solutions. And I've seen, time after time after time, folks who don't have that traditional software development background become some absolutely excellent engineers. And I can say that about many people on our team here. And so that matters not just because it makes it more accessible, but it makes it more accessible to people who have other skill sets, like maybe they understand the business really well. They understand the problems really well, right? They're good communicators, they're good consultants, they're good at painting a picture of what the vision should be. And so if you take a tool set like this and you give it to those people, then I think you start to see some really impressive things, right? Again, to my point a minute ago, ultimately, we're building software to solve problems, but you have to know what those problems are. Right, you have to know what the goal of the organization is to be able to solve for it, to be able to achieve it. And what I've found in my experience personally and with our company is the folks who really understand that aspect of it, when you give them a tool to actually create the solution, that's when, kind of the magic happens, so to speak. It's when you get the best of both worlds. Most people, even though we think we do, we don't really always know what we want and what we need. And you can't do this in focus groups. You can't do it with one meeting. You've got to put things in front of them and let them touch and feel it, because that feedback is not the same feedback you get if you're sitting in a requirements gathering session, one day or 1 week to then deliver the solution a year later. What you think you need is not always what you actually need, and you won't know until you're actually in there doing it, right? And that is just the harsh reality. It's unavoidable. The other thing that changes is your priorities. You might need those features, those capabilities, but you've realized, well, actually the priority is different than I thought, right? And then when you bring in a good engineering team, they should be able to look at this and say, okay, I understand what your priorities are. I understand why those are your priorities. You say you want this capability to solve for those. Well, my perspective tells me that, well, this is a design that solves for 20 of those, not one of those, right? Let me show it to you. And then they can say, oh, well, you're right. This is a better way to solve the problem. Because what usually happens a lot of times is clients want a solution to the problem before we've even really understood the problem. And there should be part of that process, but a good engineering team should be able to look at that, say, give me the problem first, help me to fully understand this, help me understand the objectives too, what we're trying to do, and then let's solution it together. Don't jump to the solution to start, because that can send you a lot of, indirect ways to ultimately get to it. And I can't count the number of times where you build something or ultimately get to the final point and you say, well, if we had known all of this up front, we wouldn't have built it this way. You know what I mean? And so that's just kind of how it goes. In the early days of my experience, you just kind of build something to get the job done. And you don't really consider maintainability as much, but more than that, you don't consider how the end user will engage with it and how independent they could be, right? So what I mean by that is, if they want to change and it needs to go to development to make a change, okay, you say, okay. But what I've learned, and I got to credit, our CTO for teaching me a lot of this, is a good reflexive design, a good architectural design should enable the end user to manage as much as possible at runtime. So when they log into the application without going to me or to development or IT at all, any day where you can go as the business and not have to reach out to IT is a good day, right? Yep. So you want to structure applitions and design them in such a way that facilitates that as much as possible. Now, there's always a trade-off. Sometimes that's a much more labor-intensive design to implement. So you kind of got to weigh your, the pros and cons. But several years into my experience, begin to develop things that way to say, okay, how do I structure this in a way so that the business can manage it themselves and not come to me every time they want to change something, right? And I think of, how we did that, example of how we did that at scale just a few years ago is a large client of ours and a large client of Mendix was expanding internationally. They wanted to roll out a particular application to, at the time, I think the number was 6 or 7 countries. The original design that they had called for was separate applications for every country. We disagreed and proposed a single application to cover all of it. That reflexive design is how we did that, right? And so ultimately, that one application enabled them to bring on something like 12 different countries in a 10-month period, all in the same application, right? And we got to the point where they could onboard a new country in just a few hours because no code changes were necessary. Everything was done at runtime with the actual application by the teams, the local teams at each new geography that they were onboarding. We've done a lot of interesting things over the years. Built some really technically complex systems, done things where we've launched applications that have fundamentally launched actual companies. We've also, of course, built applications and systems for big corporations, internal things. But I think what I settled on thinking about this yesterday was, we had kind of 2 projects in the early days, more or less kicked off around the same time. One was for our first enterprise client, and then one was a product that we built internally and launched ourselves that carried on for years. In both of those cases, I should kind of take a step back and paint a little picture here. When we launched the company and we landed these first 2 projects, there were 2 engineers on the team. Me, having never built any software whatsoever, including in Mendix. And then our current CEO, Michael, who had a couple years experience in Mendix. I'll just say that, Michael maybe oversold himself a little bit. And there was no doubt that I had no experience in building with Mendix at the time. Yet, in both cases, we were able to deliver, right? So while we were kind of weak from the engineering side of things, we understood both businesses. We understood what they were trying to do. We understood the value they were after and what we were trying to deliver. And we were able to deliver the value in both cases and hit our marks, right? The enterprise client was a short project, 6 to 8 weeks, but we hit our mark. And so I look back then and I say, well, we've come a long way. I've come a long way. Michael's come a long way. The whole team has. But back then, I said those are my favorite projects and most proud of because, again, two 20-something-year-old kids who knew nothing were able to figure it out well enough to deliver. And so you think, well, if we can do that with admittedly very little knowledge and expertise, what happens if you give us a few years? What happens if we can hire some other people who know more than us? You know, and it goes back to one of the points I made earlier about the powers of the platform of simplifying the process and the effort, making it just much easier to build software and giving that power to people who understand the business, who know how to work with the business, and what can they do, right? And I think that's kind of what cemented, at least to me, that, hey, we can do this. There's something here. This is, you know, we thought that obviously we wouldn't start the company if we didn't, but the fact that we can do this and deliver these solutions to these companies that we're doing quite a bit of business. This was not mom and pop shops. This was companies doing hundreds of millions of dollars a year. The fact that we could do that with so little, quite frankly, technical expertise, you know, certainly cemented our you know, that this was worth continuing for us. And again, certainly two of the projects I'm most proud of. Again, over the years, I've supported or worked across most of our verticals on projects in financial services, to construction, to manufacturing, to healthcare, real estate, really all of it. You know, when you're a small company, you kind of wear a lot of different hats, and quite frankly, the business comes where it comes, and when it comes in, you've got to pick it up and run with it. Today, right now, my focus is building our industrial group, which includes energy and manufacturing. And then, you know, we have a diversified sector, which is kind of our catch-all that we all kind of support depending on what projects we have that fall into that. And then myself with a few colleagues oversee our enterprise services team as well, which gives me a little bit of oversight into all the sectors and all the projects. My aha moment was probably circa 2013 when I saw the platform for the first time, because I was sold then. You know, it didn't take a genius to see the power in the platform. This would have been version in the 4s at one time, even back then. And so that was when it was clear to me that this was something that I wanted to learn how to use, because it gave me, again, the tool set that I wanted to be able to actually build the solutions that I was at the time giving in the format of a PowerPoint deck to a company I was consulting to, right? And so, you know, the aha moment to me wasn't some, you know, new feature, new capability I learned from a technical perspective. It was, this technology exists, it's accessible to you. You need to grab it and use it. Yeah, my superpower in the world of low code, again, I might answer this a little bit differently than most. I'm a solution-minded person. I'm like one of those annoying people that you give them a problem, they're trying to find the solution right away, right? And so if I have any superpower at all, and I don't know if I do, it really isn't as a developer or an engineer. You know, like I said, I'm an expert Mendix engineer. I have been for many years now. Built a lot of things. I'm certainly competent. But I'll be the first to admit, there are a lot of people on our team, many who have less experience than I do, who are much, much better engineers and architects than I am. My strength really is the ability to quickly understand the business that we're consulting to, the problems they have, the objectives they have, and then take that information and quickly design a solution for what it should look like, communicate that vision, and then ultimately execute on the vision. So in some ways, it's kind of trying to basically be able to bring it all together. That's where I excel the most, and that's where I'm kind of strongest. And going now, the fun part of where we are as a company is I've got great people that I can bring in on the technical side to kind of fill in where I'm not as strong or where I don't want to play as much. You know, in the early days, we didn't have that, but now we do. And so, again, if you can take people who really understand your business, who understand where you're trying to go and know how to get there, and pair those with some really, really sharp, technically sound folks, a platform like Mendix, you can get it all. First thing I would say is seek variety, okay? It's very easy to get stagnant and to kind of just almost punch the clock. I mean, yes, you're building things every day, but you're kind of building the same thing, right? And you've got to seek variety, because that variety is going to force you to solve different problems, and it's going to force you to grow and approach problems differently and use just different pieces of the platform, or different modules or different services you need to connect to, or different widgets you may need to develop or use, right? It'll force you to do different things and learn different things. It's like that there's no exception or replacement for actual experience. And so you can read all you want. You can read the newest release from Mendix on version X, Y, and Z, but you got to use those new features, right? And so seek that out. In our business, in the consulting professional services business, it's kind of just part of the deal, right? Because that project will end, right? And then you will go to the next project at the next, customer, and that might be in a different industry. And so over time, over these several years, you're going to work on several different projects with several different companies, right? But if you're working within industry, you can get a little more pigeonholed and a little more stuck doing kind of the same things over and over again. So I would say seek that out as much as you can. The other thing is, the next one is find a technical mentor, or go to an organization that basically provides that. I don't need necessarily a mentor in the traditional sense of the word, where you have lunch every week and all that. But you need someone or a group of people who have more expertise than you looking over your shoulder. You have to have that. What I've seen, again, from my personal development and with our company, as Kinetech, but also the folks that have joined us from other organizations, when people have progressed the fastest and our strongest engineers, particularly from a senior kind of architectural perspective, all of them have had that. They've had a technical team that knew a lot more than they did, looking over their shoulder, reviewing their work, telling them why this isn't best practice design, why this isn't performant, why it works, but it's not right. It's a big distinction between what works and maybe what's right. Again, I had that as one of our partners, my early days, to kind of bounce ideas off of, review designs with. We do it as part of our company, as part of what we do, all of our projects. But I'd say that's critical. And if you really want to accelerate your development and growth, that's how I think you do it. You can grind and you'll learn more. And if you have a particular aptitude for this, you'll obviously learn more faster than some others. But, an hour conversation with a senior architect who really knows what they're talking about, maybe that's 6 months of you trying to learn on your own, right? And of course, you don't know what you don't know. And that, your design, again, it might work, but it doesn't scale well. And maybe you don't realize that until it's too late. But, a design review of the senior architect could tell you that right away. I would say I'd be an archaeologist, particularly Greco-Roman history and Mesopotamia. I'd be the guy kind of on the site in those locations, digging and looking and trying to understand the lives that people lived at those times and what it was like then. So it's a pretty big departure from saying, software development.